welcome to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. So, in a second, we're going to be sharing the tea on demystifying legal requirements for nonprofits. But if we've never met before, I'm Sabrina, the Dream Team Architect and President and CEO of Building Better Boards. I specialize in building elite leadership teams for corporate and nonprofit boards and CEOs, turning high level potential into extraordinary performance. I'm a transformative board facilitator, again, for corporate and nonprofit organizations, international keynote speaker, driving 14 million in revenue and organizational resilience, expert in strategic leadership and governing excellence. And we have with us today Kyara Ofuani, attorney at law. And so, what's going to happen is this conversation is going to be critical. If you're wanting to understand the legal requirements for nonprofits, whether you are a nonprofit, mission driven company or an association. And that's why we have with us Kyara. And I'm so excited to have her. So, Kyara, told you I was going to do that because my goddaughter's name is Kyara. So, share a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much first for having me on your platform. I am so excited to be able to tell everyone about just different things that are foundational and making sure that we're able to strategically expand and have greater impact in our nonprofits. I'm Kyara Ofuani, a nonprofit attorney in Houston, Texas, but I do serve globally. I love to work with international groups and really a lot of East Coast groups too, because I love the DC area. But definitely am serving at a global because I do believe that the impact should have a collective. We should be unified, working on something that is like helping the whole, both locally and globally. So a little bit about me. I am originally from Wisconsin, but my family has roots in Mississippi. So I kind of went back and forth my whole life. So I have a little bit of that Southern with me.
All
And I
right
went to,
now.
yes, ma'am. And I went to Tennessee State for undergrad. So I don't know if there's any HBCUs in the house, but I
Well,
am a TSU alum. That was one of the pivotal experiences that actually made me realize that I want to do more in the nonprofit. So I grew up with my mom having nonprofits and doing grant writing. So I grew up kind of in that area and serving the community. But it was more so like a hobby. It wasn't something that I just knew that it could be like your life's work until I went to college and I realized that that is a area that I can actually make into my field. And I always wanted to be an attorney. And so kind of just combined those things where I'm able to, live out my assignment with serving the community, but also being in the legal realm. And so went to Thurgood Marshall for law school in here in Houston, Texas, and I did my master's in nonprofit management at Columbia University, which was also a HBCU fellowship program. So definitely, if you guys have people that went to HBCUs and are looking for that, that is an opportunity for you to do as well. But that's just a little bit about the education that I've done in that area. And so since then, I've just been working with groups, helping them keep their foundations and legal compliance, getting funding for different missions. I like to focus mainly on faith-based groups, but we definitely do faith-based and a lot of environmental justice groups, things of that nature.
wow. So my girl is very educated. So I'm so excited to have you here because there's some legal stuff that's been going on that sometimes people just don't get. So I am ready to get started. Welcome if you're
Yes.
coming to this broadcast. If you're not, we're going to send this out in replay. So take out your notepad so you can make notes. So, in your experience, what are the most common legal pitfalls that nonprofits encounter, and how can organizations proactively address these issues?
That is a great question. I would say one of the most common pitfalls is neglecting to have governance. So, a lot of organizations are very, very mission driven. And so sometimes they forget to have policies and procedures in place. So, such as having your bylaws, having a set of policies or funding policies, what can you guys spend money on? What type of approvals? Who can move money from where? Different things like that, and then having some type of board oversight. So making sure that your board knows their fiduciary duties and what legal compliance things that they have to stay intact with for being on the board of directors. I see that a lot, and really not having that foundation. When things happen, you can tell it starts to get rocky, or maybe the organization ends up not being able to do their mission anymore because they weren't able to have a set of rules that people could properly follow.
Oh my God, you're speaking my language. That is where I come in with all the governance stuff. I'm working with a client right now who's like, they're like, we never had to deal with these issues before. We're grown, and all of a sudden, do you have? I just got an email right now that says, do you have a petty cash policy? Do you have a procurement policy? Do you have this? Do you have that? And I'm like, you've been around for 19 years and you don't have any of this, but you're exactly
Exactly.
right. They focus on the mission and not on the governance. Thank you
Right.
for saying
And
that. That is
it
from
is, yeah,
you,
it's so
attorney.
pivotal in organizations, especially in communities of color, are a lot of communities that I do see that a lot with. And so I do try to focus mainly on getting a lot of those groups in legal compliance, because a lot of, like I said, a lot of people want to focus on the mission, but sometimes, when you get that businessy side, it starts to, be a little rocky. But ways that we can actually proactively address this is by simply, one, when you're filing, or whoever you're having do your 501(c)(3) status in the first place, if they haven't even drafted you guys the bylaws, or you haven't even looked at the bylaws, it's like red flag number one.
Yes.
You already have to have a bylaws, or they ask you to attach that with the application. But what I'm seeing is that, like, I'll ask groups like, hey, let me see your bylaws, and like, I don't know, like the attorney filed it or something. But it's like, why don't you go over the bylaws with your attorney? You're supposed to agree to that. So just like, first things first, make sure that you actually know your bylaws, because this is for you and your organization. And then also just simply doing board training. People should be having an onboarding training, signing a commitment statement, reading and making sure they know what duties are, how often you guys are going to meet, what are the penalties if you guys don't meet. So just like at a basic level, you should be training people as they come into the business. And I think that that is a proactive way that people can start to make sure that they get into compliance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're just on question number one, and you're speaking the right language. People just don't understand how important their bylaws are. But I don't want to get out of order. We'll come back to it if we need to. So you said mission, and people really like to dive into mission, but how do you balance legal compliance with a nonprofit's mission driven focus? And can you share an example?
Yes. I would say that legal compliance and mission driven alliance go hand in hand. You can't properly execute your mission without having a foundation. And so if you don't have the two in alignment, then you don't truly actually believe in the mission, in my opinion. It's just kind of words that are there. And so a way that people could actually make sure, in an example, of how they can, like, live out their mission, and then also make sure that they're in legal compliance. So like, for example, if you're doing a grant, with your grant application or proposal, you're going to have to lay out, the storytelling, the mission, the vision, whatever project you guys are going to do, all of that jazz. That is great. But then once you get the grant, they're going to require you to do reporting. They're going to make sure that you have to show measures of impact. There are going to be certain restrictions that you sign in the MOU when you get the funding. And so, on top of the mission that you've already displayed to them, you have to also display that you have that legal compliance, because if you don't have both, then there is not funding that's going to come through for your organization, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. You can give these people money and not comply with what they need you to do, is what it makes
Uh-huh.
sense to me. And I know you talked about, grants, but what are some key legal considerations, other key legal considerations that nonprofits should keep in mind when applying for grants and maintaining compliance?
Yeah, so some things that people can think about is, well, first just making sure that they know the criteria for the eligibility. So they're going to tell you what type of status that you can or cannot have for the organization. They're going to let you know what type of reportings are going to be on there. So like when people see opportunity in the money, sometimes they're just like, okay, this grant's available. But you do have to look at the eligibility, and there is always fine print, and then they generally give you a number that you can call or email to ask questions. And so I always suggest that, just so that you're in an understanding of what you're actually getting yourself into. And so that is something that I think people should just at a basic level look at the criteria, look at what type of reportings. A lot of grants nowadays want you to have some type of audit. And
Yeah.
so if your organization has not been audited, or you're a new organization, you should be looking into some type of fiscal sponsorship so that you have a parent organization that has the stability and the foundation, the years to be able to provide some of those financial documents and help you stay in legal compliance. Just different things like that should be a part of it. You should always be trying to keep some type of accounting. Even if your organization isn't making money, I think that that's a misconception, that you
Yes,
shouldn't be keeping track of your expenses and whatever donations are coming in and different things of that nature, because they're going to look at all of those bank statements as well.
that is so true. I've had people, say, "Well, let me see your budget," and whoo, girl, it's not a budget at all. So I get it. So here you go. Could you walk us through the key legal requirements that every nonprofit should be aware of, regardless of their size
Yeah.
or their mission?
Definitely. So I would first start with your tax exempt status. So you need to have both your federal and your state, because there are a lot of people that think that it is just one or the other, but you need to have both, because most states have state taxes and then there's also federal taxes. And so if you're having people donate, especially like all over, those individuals need to be able to write it off on their taxes. But if you're not recognized at a state level, they may not be able to actually write that off on their tax, and it becomes a thing. So you need to make sure that you have your federal status, and then check whatever you need to do with your state. A lot of states have a comptroller. And so another thing that people don't know is, like, once you get your actual federal and state status, you still have to go to the comptroller so that you can make sure that you get a sales tax number, so that when you're going to purchase things, they actually take the sales taxes off and different things of that nature. So I would say, just at a basic level, all organizations should be staying in compliant with their federal, state, and then the comptroller, because you going to the Secretary of State is different than the comptroller. So I would say first there. Then I would say after your status would be the governance. So making sure that you have a set of bylaws and your constitution. Definitely, all organizations should have that, whether you're big or small. And then also everyone should have some type of funding policy. So if you're taking donations, then you should have procedures on how the donations come in, how they're being tracked, what you can use the money on, who's authorized to use the money, and things of that nature. So I think at a basic level, those things. And then the final thing I would say is annual filing. It doesn't matter if you're big or small, you have to file taxes and submit an annual report to the state every year, and they give you a particular date. And if you don't do that, then you lose your tax exempt status.
Amen. To the state and to the federal, 990. Kyara, let me tell you about a nightmare that I experienced with a client. They lost their tax exemption from federal. And so I kept saying the only way, one of the main ways you lose your tax exemption is because you failed to file your 990s 3 years in a row. You got revoked. And they kept arguing with me that they had filed the taxes. They had filed the taxes. And finally I said, send me the tax, send it to me. They sent me their personal tax return. They were filing the nonprofit income on a personal tax return. Unpack that for me. There's got to be more people out there doing that.
Yes. Well, I actually have not encountered someone that has done that. That is very interesting. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
No, so if you are an employee of your nonprofit, then you should be filing the money that you made as an employee, not the revenue as the of the organization as a whole. And that would be you filling out a W-2 and or a 1099, whatever, if you're an independent contractor, you're a full-time employee with that nonprofit. And so I think that that could even be taken almost to the IRS thinking that it's fraud if you were to
Yep.
do that. And so
Hmm.
that is definitely not something that you want to do, is mixing your business and your personal funds. You should have a separate business account, and then your a separate personal account. And if you want to pay yourself through the business, then you need to file that proper paperwork to show that you're an employee.
Thank you. One more thing.
Yes.
Um, there's rumor out there.
Hmm.
You don't have to meet, your board doesn't have to meet. But what I've read, and you can tell me with your legal experience if this has changed, is that your board, even it needs to meet at minimum once a year to stay viable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you definitely, the board has to meet at minimum one time. I think that it's different per state as well. But yeah, there can't be any meetings because that would be basically violating some of the duty of some of your fiduciary duties, as far as making sure that the organization is in compliance, because that's a part of like the duty of loyalty and the duty of obedience, different things like that, that make
Mhm.
sure that you do the due diligence to make sure the monies are right in the organization, that they're actually living out the mission. Because the thing is, a nonprofit is different from a business in that you're supposed to be, all of the acts are supposed to be geared towards that mission and then impacting the community, which is why they give you the tax exempt status. And so you having a board of directors is supposed to keep the founder, the team members, the volunteers, whoever's engaging in that, in accountability for whatever they said that they're going to be doing the mission to, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. I am just so excited that you're saying all the things and it's coming from a legal expert, from an attorney, because people get confused. So we're just going to leave it at that. And so if you're just joining us, welcome to the broadcast. And we're currently talking about demystifying legal requirements for nonprofits. And we've just covered some golden nuggets. Look, we're going to delve more into this, but I'm just so excited about get your governance in order. Make sure that you're filing your 990. Make sure you're looking for a fiscal agent. Get some of those foundational pieces in place. Have a board meeting. All of those things we talked about. Go back and look at this if you're just jumping on now. But now we're going to get into one of my favorite topics. And
Uh-huh.
I know most people get these and they put them on a shelf and they never look at them again. But why are nonprofit bylaws critical, and what are the consequences of failing to review and
Mhm.
then to adhere to them?
That is a great question. I would say that, your bylaws are really the backbone of your nonprofit as far as an order. You need to do everything in decency and order. And if you don't have something written down for people to follow, that is when chaos can be incited. And then you also can't hold people accountable if you have not had written instructions or things to follow. It's kind of like a free fall, basically. And so outlining what type of structure you want, making sure that you have a balance of how decision making is done, what programs you guys need to be doing yearly, and different things of that nature, what goes outside of the mission, what doesn't align with you all. That would help with just always having some type of foundation in place. Because the thing is, if you as a founder are the only person that knows what's going on, then it's like you made the nonprofit for you. You didn't make it for the community, because the nonprofit should be structured in which anyone can come and be able to run that same mission, because it's about the community, not about the individuals that founded it, if that makes sense. So definitely, I believe that bylaws make sure that that is in place. And if you are not having your bylaws, your procedures, your instructions, then you are not in decency and order right now.
It's not about you as the founder, it's about the community. What you just said was a mouthful. So I'm gonna let you breathe because you are Kyara, you are putting things down that people really need to hear. And I'm going to ask a big question.
Yes, ma'am.
And the question I'm going to ask, I'm probably going to add even more input to this because I keep getting these emails and texts fired at me. So I would
Uh-huh.
love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
So, what emerging legal challenges do you foresee for nonprofits in the coming years?
Okay. Woo, a
Oh,
lot. Okay,
exactly.
so there are really some challenges, and so that's really why we need to get our foundation together, right? So, first, when it comes to like data and policy regulation, because we're so mission driven, sometimes we're not into the tech side of it, but we do have to recognize that we're dealing with money, especially if we are getting hundreds and thousands of dollars to our organization to be able to function. We need to be able to protect our donors' information when we're taking their banking or whatever the case is. Also, if we have employees and different things of that nature, there has to be some type of risk management policy around, or data privacy tech people working with us, so that we're making sure that we are being stewards of the community's money. So that would really be like the first thing, because I definitely have been seeing like a lot of hacking and different things like that going on. The next thing that I would say is changes in regulations for funding. So I right now am in the transition of research of trying to figure out what is going to be the best funding route for clients and nonprofits. So we know that we've seen things with the freeze and different things of that nature. Given the state of the nation, it may be advantageous to start looking at more private grants, looking at individual donors, fundraising, things of that nature, so that you aren't solely like dependent on one funding. You need to have a diverse funding portfolio, and then your organization won't be impacted if like something major like that happens. So I think that that is the next thing that we need to start thinking about with organizations, like how do we diversify our funding portfolio and be able to sustain if something was to happen. So I always tell groups that you can make revenue from your organization, it's just the
Yeah,
money has to go back to the mission. So whether you guys have t-shirts or you're selling goods or
right.
whatever the case is, you can have some type of revenue from the nonprofit. It just needs to go back into the mission. So that's something that you should probably consider as well if you're only dependent on grants and donations right now. And then I would also say the final piece to look into is equity or diversity in leadership. So with a lot of the DEI things going on, we do need to look into our leadership. We need to look into how we're building our boards, who is a part of our boards, making sure that everyone's in line with the mission, making sure that we're not saying or portraying certain things that may get us out of compliance, because
Yep.
there are a lot of eyes on nonprofits to make sure that they aren't violating certain things, and there's some orders in that can make you easily lose your tax exempt status if you are portraying a certain thing. So don't want to say certain words
I
to make
know.
the live, be weird. So you want to look into that, what compliance and what can make you lose your 501c3 status, because there are some new laws around that. And so those would be the three areas. So data privacy and risk management, the regulation around funding, and then how your leadership looks.
Well, I know you don't want to say the words, but I'm in this business, and I actually have a couple of friends that
Mhm.
work at certain positions, and
Okay.
they're like, if you want funding or anything, don't use implicit bias,
Okay. Yeah.
inclusion, exclusiveness, inclusivity, increase
Hmm.
diversity, increase the diversity, indigenous community,
Hmm.
inequalities, inequity. All of these words,
Yeah.
LGBT, marginalized,
Hmm.
minorities, diverse community, diverse groups, diversify, anything with diversity in it, stereotypes, systematic, trauma,
Yeah.
underrepresented, underappreciated, underserved, under women, victim, women and underrepresented, advocate, um, anti-racist. All of these words are red
Yeah.
flags right now.
Yes, yes. And that's very unfortunate, because a lot of organizations, that is the sole mission to serve, right? So we do have to get creative. The great thing is that there are a plethora of words to use.
Yes,
There are many languages. We just need to switch it up. We need to do some research on the meaning of the words that we're using, and just, rechange the language of how we're addressing, because I'm not saying to change the mission. I would never say that. Just
right.
we got to get smarter on how we're speaking. about certain things, and then also making sure that we're having those rules and policy in place, because if your team members know how to speak, then you won't get the backlash, because it may not be particularly you, but if you don't have a policy around what your team can say, what they can put on social media and different things of that nature, then you're putting yourself at risk.
That's true. So how can nonprofits boards effectively engage with legal counsel to ensure they're making informed decisions while remaining true to the organization's values?
Definitely. I always suggest that people have some type of legal on their board. And so that legal person on the board can be communicating to you guys. But if you don't have a legal person on your board, I always suggest that at least quarterly you guys are meeting with your legal consultant or your legal attorney, and you're revisiting the bylaws. So when you guys are having your quarterly like internal audit, like, okay, what is going on? What does the money look like? Have we stayed aligned with this? And the attorney should be able to be there to assess what you guys have done and talked about, and then let you know whether or not there are some things that you need to work on or not work on. And so I think that at a basic level, that the board should be working with legal at least every quarter, at least once every quarter for sure.
Okay, and you said get legal on your board. A lot of people don't come to attorneys to serve on their board. As an attorney, what do you think that's about? That's one, and I know that's not on the question, but what is that? What do you think that's about? And then two, how would someone approach an attorney to serve on their board?
I believe that people shy away from having an attorney on their board because they don't want to have to follow the rules. Just simply
Oh,
that,
very good
honestly.
point.
And that attorneys are going to ask questions. Because, like, when I've been on boards, so it's funny because, like, mini story, I have been on boards where I was a legal person, but they had business consultants. And so those business consultants were not attorneys. And so when they're saying things in the board meeting, I'm like, wait, I don't, that's not correct, And so that becomes a thing, because now you have someone that is maybe more of an expert in a particular area that can cause energy. So, but you need it. It's like, why not have the expert in that field make sure that you guys are in compliance? So yeah, so I think that that's probably why people shy away from it, or sometimes they're nervous that attorneys don't want to do things pro bono. But the crazy thing is they do. Like, a lot of attorneys have to get pro bono hours anyway to keep your license up. So you should definitely reach out to an attorney. I've had groups just simply email me requesting if I would like to be on their board for a certain period of time, and let me know about their mission, what the requirements and different things of that nature. I think it's always good to at least have like legal, an accountant, a business person, a marketing person. And so when you're creating your board committees, you have an expert in every area. And so that also saves you money because they're already kind of volunteering within their expertise. So you maybe don't have to like hire outside counsel on a consistent basis. Maybe you can bring them in quarterly for certain things, or maybe your board attorney is okay with doing all of the legal things, and then that helps save you guys money as well. So I definitely suggest having some person that has some type of legal knowledge to help you guys stay in compliance.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think that people just get intimidated by that, and you've just made it very clear. Hey, even to stay compliant, we need to have some pro bono. So don't be afraid to go out and ask. So that kind of segues into exactly what you are about. So you're known for empowering organizations. So can you share a success story where your legal guidance significantly impacted a nonprofit's ability to pursue its mission more effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I feel like I should have a lot of examples, because I feel like just simply filing your annual report is making sure you still do your mission. But I want to think of like maybe like a super crucial time. I mean, I would say just as simple as, like, I had a group that had a really big conference, and they had to pay a lot of money for this community conference. Some of the sponsors ended up dropping out of different things of that nature, but they were still wanting to continue this thing for the community. Once they kind of brought me in for to help with fundraising and different things of that nature, I was able to look at their, I always do an audit with someone before I even like take them on as a client, because I need to know what I'm getting myself into. And so when I was doing their audit, I realized that they weren't registered with the comptrollers. And so I got them registered with it. Me getting them registered with the comptroller and getting that sales taxes took $17,000 off of their bill. And that was like significant because that, helped them not be so much over their budget, given that some of the sponsors dropped and different things of that nature. So I would say just something as small as like if they didn't even know what the comptroller was and that this is something that could take money off of their expenses. So I would say that's maybe just an example.
No, that's a great example because 17,000 is 17,000, and
Yeah.
that's a document. It's just amazing to me, and I thank you for doing what you do, because there are a number of organizations who they not just, but they got into this because of the passion and not the business. And you're saying we need to think about the business, which is something that I truly believe in as well. And so I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions out there. I know we have some comments out there, but if there is no questions, people often ask me about how do I engage my board in fundraising, right?
Okay.
The answer is you can. And the answer is I can help you. And so if you're interested in that, just visit my website at www.buildingbetterboards.com to check out my services. And if you're watching this on rebroadcast and you have a question, still put the question in the comments, because Kyara and I'll make sure she get the question because she is the legal expert and she's dropped a lot of knowledge. I'll send her the questions that you have, understanding that. So with that, I do want to say one comment.
Mhm.
Jermaine is saying, he said mission is foundational for nonprofit operations. And I echo that, but I want people to hear what you said. You got to get your business in order, right? We tend to focus a lot on mission, and that's great because you got into this to help people. But in order to help people and to continue to help people long term and sustainable, you got to get the business in order. So, with that in mind, my friend, I want to tell people how they can get in contact with you and share any final words that you have.
Yes, definitely. And I want to add to that comment to even give like a simpler example. And so, say that my mission is to liberate my community. That is a mission that I can tell people and say, and it sounds great. Like, okay, she's going out to liberate the community. But then there's going to be the question, how is she liberating the community? What does liberation mean? What does it not mean to liberate? What are the boundaries? How far does liberation take? What are you willing to sacrifice? All of those things are within your bylaws and your procedures. But if you have not had a structure of what does actual liberation for the community look like and what can tangibly be done within a structure, then you can't actually live out the statement of I want to liberate the community or my mission is to liberate the community, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to give like a simpler example to show how they go together. They have to go hand in hand. But places that people can find us is just look up Ofuani Legal Group online. That's my husband and I have a law firm, Ofuani Legal Group. We help faith-based groups and nonprofits, ministries help with their legal compliance and grant writing, as well as just strategic planning, board governance, things of that nature. Really just all things business, whatever general counsel would need. And then we also have a nonprofit, Freedom of Faith Food Bank, and we're doing a really big project, Freedom Together Coalition, right now. And so we definitely would love to have support with that as well. And so you can just look up Freedom of Faith Food Bank online as well, and all of our social medias would pop up. But definitely would love if you have questions about how to get into legal compliance. Right now, taxes are coming up. And so that's something that I'm really big on, putting educational things out online right now. When due dates are for your states and how to submit your annual reports, helping people get through their audits and different things of that nature. So definitely, if you are a nonprofit needing help with the tax side of it, given that this is tax season, definitely feel free to reach out to us as well.
You said a word, and I know I said we were going to be done, but let me just say this. Here's the other thing around taxes and all of that. Everybody has a different fiscal year. Everybody has a different fiscal year, and your 990s are due based on your fiscal year. Now, where do you find your fiscal year? Kyara, guess where you find it? You know where you find it. In your bylaws, which means you got to read your bylaws. That's why I love bylaws. They tell you everything. So if you have any of those questions, reach out to them. You need good legal counsel. And you heard what was said. Look, say your website for me.
Ofuani Legal Group.
Yeah, Ofuani Legal Group. Spell it for me. So, and I'm gonna
Oh
drop
yes.
it. I'm gonna drop
O
it in the
F
comments.
U. Oh yes, I can put it in the comments too. OFUANI legalgroup.com.
There you go. So there is no excuse. None, none, none. This is gonna be forever on the, what do you call this? The intranet, right? Forever on the internet. No excuse. It's gonna be on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, in the Facebook group. Go back, look at this, and make sure we're taking care of business. I cannot stress that enough. Do you have any other words?
I would say walking away, just make sure that moving forward with nonprofits, just make sure that you guys are moving with intention and having impact. There are a lot of things going on in the world right now. And so just to say you have a nonprofit, just to say it isn't really the wave anymore. We want to make sure that we're doing things in decency and order. So we want to make sure that we actually have the structure, that the service that we're giving to the community is truly needed, and that we're doing it in a way that's healthy and positive. And so I would just charge everyone to make sure that they go back and look at, check their heart posture on why they're doing it, and then see what investments need to be made to make sure that it's in order.
Perfect. And that's sipping tea with Sabrina. Look, I'm usually sipping tea during this, but girl, I was so into what you were saying, I didn't even pick up my cup. It just sat there. So that's sipping tea with Sabrina. See y'all next time. Thank you so much for everything, and be